I may not have pointed out this before, but I was actually in two different military branches. I've told you all that I was in the Navy, and at some point you may have heard that I was in the Army as well, and that is true. I spent 4 years in the 82nd Airborne, got out, spent, I think it was 15 or 16 months starving, and thought, I need to get back into the military. But I was tired of being in the Army, so I joined the Navy. So let's tell a story from the Army days. The time that I got entangled about it would have been about 800 feet in the air. I was in the 82nd Airborne. The 82nd Airborne, obviously, unlike the 101st Air Assault Division, jumps out of airplanes. They fly over the drop zone at about 850 feet, and everybody jumps out of the airplane as quickly as possible. Now, you're thinking, why would anybody jump out of a perfectly good aircraft? Pack that many people into an Air Force aircraft, let them fly you around for a few hours, you'd jump out too. You'd be happy if they gave you a parachute, but as long as they opened the door and said, there's the drop zone, you'd jump. Well, it's part of the job of the jump master. That's the guy standing at the back, waving at you and putting people out. It's part of his job to try to keep you separated. You're supposed to have one person go out one door, one person go out the other door. Well, in practice, it doesn't really work that way. Everybody piles out the door pretty much as fast as they can. Sometimes the jump master can keep them separated. A lot of times he can't. Well, this is a story of one of those times. I'm heading towards the back. I believe it was a C141 jump. I jump out the door, and let me tell you a little bit something about how the jump sequence goes. You go out the door, chin on chest, feet knees together, hands on the ends of the reserve parachute, which is just a little bit lower than the center of your chest, and you start with your eyes open. This is important. Even though you're jumping out of an aircraft in flight, you probably should keep your eyes open so maybe you can see what's going on. It's a little difficult to react to things if you can't see them. You jump out the door, you're looking at your toes with your chin on your chest, and you're saying 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, and when you hit that 4,000, the parachute should be opening. And boy, when it opens, it opens. You suddenly get very, very heavy, and it's incredibly loud. Oh my goodness, you would not believe how loud it is. It's loud in the plane. It's like being inside a trash can with somebody beating on it with a hammer. Well, you jump out the door, and as you're going out the door, not only you get all this noise, then you get hit with a prop wash and all the wind blowing across your ears and your face. It's like somebody taking that trash can and throwing it over Niagara Falls. Well, you hit the end of this, I think it's 21 feet long, but I'm not really sure. You hit the end of your static line, and it starts pulling the parachute off your back. Well, the way it's rigged up, it extends the risers, it extends all of the parachute cord, it starts pulling all the parachute cord out of the deployment bag, then it starts pulling the parachute out of the deployment bag, and when you finally get the whole thing stretched out, there's a little brake cord at the end that ties the parachute into the deployment bag being fixed to the end of the static line. That brake cord, when it finally breaks, that leaves your whole parachute pointing at the airplane, which is naturally flying away from you. You're being drugged through the air at about 120 knots, 130, 140 miles an hour. Well, you weigh a whole lot more than the parachute does. So you're below, and from the perspective of the wind behind the parachute, you're shooting through the air at 120, 130 miles an hour, and this parachute is just sort of sitting there in the wind. Well, it snatches itself the other direction, so that now your body just basically, in reality, what happens is your body passes the parachute in the air, just the parachute's above you, and you swing underneath it, and then that pulls the opening of the parachute into the wind, and the parachute then opens. And, it opens gradually for certain values of gradual, and you suddenly weigh a whole lot more than you should. It's very comforting, actually. You would think it would be a little bit scary, but you're like, oh, I just jumped out of an airplane. Oh, yay. Well, now you're in front of the parachute. The parachute slows you down, and if you look at the videos, it looks like the parachute swings above the top of you. From the perspective of the jumper, that's what it looks like too. But what really happens is you swing underneath the parachute, which has then slowed you down. Well, remember how I said you're supposed to put people out the door 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2? Well, there's a reason for that. Because if you both go out the door at the same time, there is the possibility that you will be so close to the guy when his parachute opens up that you'll run into each other. Typically on a 141, I don't think actual body contact happens. I think that can happen if some bad circumstances come up. It can happen in a C130, but I don't think it happens in a 141. But you can be close enough that your parachutes are next to each other. Well, parachutes are awful big. I think they're like, what? The ones we were using were something like 33 or 35 feet in diameter. That doesn't sound like much until you've got that many people in the air. Well, one of my friends went out. I didn't know it was my friend at the time. One of my friends went out the door at the same time I did. He was a little bit below me, a little bit behind me. And when I swung back underneath my parachute, I swung straight into his parachute. Now, if you ever look at one of the old round canopy parachutes, I don't know about the new square ones, but the round canopy parachutes have this netting. The netting is called anti-inversion netting. It's there so that the parachute can't blow itself inside out. Now, if the parachute goes completely inside out, nobody cares. It works just as well inside out as it does right side out. What you're really worried about is it twisting halfway and getting partially inverted. Well, it looks like a giant bra, and therefore, since Dolly Parton wasn't invented at the time, or nobody knew about her, it was called a Mae West, because Mae West was the Dolly Parton of her time. So a Mae West, a partial inversion is a very bad thing. You need all that parachute to slow your butt down before you hit the ground. Like they said, it's not the fall that kills you, it's the sudden stop at the end. Well, in order to keep that from happening, they got this anti-inversion net. Well, anti-inversion nets are great for stopping the parachute from turning inside out, but they will hook onto anything, and they're nets. I swung into his parachute. His parachute hooked onto his anti-inversion netting, hooked onto the canteen. I remember it like it was yesterday. It was my left canteen. It was sitting on my left kidney, and it hooked onto this. And this is where it gets funny. I mean, here I am, 800 feet in the air. I'm entangled with another dude on a parachute. I'm going to plummet to my death if I don't figure out what's wrong. Because I can collapse my own chute. I can collapse his chute. We can both die. That's going to be a lot of fun, right? And so you'd naturally think we would panic. But I turn and I look at this parachute. Oh, yeah, I should tell you, it was dark. This was a night jump. I turn and I look at this parachute and I feel for it. I'm like, what is going on? Because, the first thing you do, you don't scream and rant and rave. You're like, oh, dear. What's going on? How do I solve this problem? And I hear from down below me. This voice sounds very familiar. He says, hey, you going to get out of there? I mean, like he was asking me, hey, are you planning on passing me that beer anytime soon? Hey, you going to get out of there? And I look down at him, and I'm like, yeah, give me a minute. I think it's actually said, yeah, give me a second. And I reach down and I grab a hold of this netting and I start pulling on it, and finally it was very quick, but pop, it comes off my parachute, or it comes off my canteen. Well, a curious thing happens when parachutes are next to each other. The one that's above the one, it gets sucked into the slipstream of the other one, and since there's a low pressure, it collapses the chute. Well, my parachute collapsed. I went down rapidly, twisted and spun. The world just sort of spun around me from my perspective. And I looked up and I couldn't see him from anybody from then on. Down we went. I landed normally. Everything was fine. We get back to the turn-in point. And John Svensson was I don't believe he was my roommate at the time, but he was one of my first roommates when I first got to the unit. He's like, was that you up there? I'm like, yeah, it was. What always struck me about it is here we were, 800 feet or so in the air, 2 parachutes, one of them hooked to me, the other one about to collapse, and then eventually did collapse. If mine had collapsed above him, and then all my weight had been on his parachute, it would have collapsed his parachute, and we both would have plummeted to the ground. And nobody screamed, nobody freaked out. He's just like, hey, you gonna get out of there? And my response, instead of, oh my God, I'm gonna die, was, yeah, give me a second.